Sweden in Europa Universalis 5 is truly the backwater of Europe. The economy is a disaster. You start with a deficit of 20 ducats. The ruler, King Magnus VII, an absolutely hopeless idiot. Even the Byzantine heir to the throne can have better stats. The population is 600,000, concentrated mostly along the coast. Yes, there are plenty of fish and clay here. Yeah, a real reason to celebrate. But seriously, the richest territories are in central Sweden. The only problem is that hardly anyone lives there. However, I'll show you in a few simple steps how to use Sweden's greatest strengths to fix the country's economy, solve its population problem in less than 100 years, and prepare Sweden for the conquest of the Baltic. Welcome imperialists, Lucas here. Before we start fixing Sweden's terrible economy, I need to thank the sponsor of today's episode, the incredible free-to-play vehicle combat game War Thunder. Before I go over the opening moves I'll make as Sweden, let me briefly tell you that I'm changing my approach to recording EU5 episodes. Each country will be covered in two parts. In the first episode, I'll present my opening strategy, where I'll explain everything in more detail. I keep seeing comments asking for as few cuts as possible. In the second episode, I'll work toward a specific goal that I've set for myself. For Sweden, I'm planning to conquer the entire Baltic coastline and create a Swedish empire. Of course, you have a chance to change that goal. Leave your idea in the comments. If your suggestion intrigues me, there's a good chance I'll go for it. The next country I'm planning to cover is France, so let me know what you'd specifically like to see me do with it. Now that you know at least some of my plans for the upcoming content, let's move on to discussing the opening moves I recommend for Sweden. Now back to the game. I have to admit that Sweden's starting position isn't actually that bad. Although if it weren't for one thing, I'd say it's even more difficult than the Byzantine Empire. Well, economically it's fairly comparable. But just look at the control here and how incredibly well it spreads thanks to the fjords and lakes. That's insanely strong. Another major advantage Sweden has is its iron and copper deposits, especially this deposit right here, which comes with a massive plus 400% mining output modifier. Over time, this province becomes almost as valuable as a gold mine. And yes, throughout this campaign I'll probably keep saying here and there, because I honestly have no idea how to pronounce most of these names correctly, unless they're as simple as Nora. And while we're talking about iron, just look at how much of it you can smelt, not just mine. Another strong advantage Sweden has is its urban rights, but I'll cover those a bit later. The biggest advantage is actually under the society tab, more specifically its religion, because Sweden can adopt the Norse faith and restore the worship of the old gods. That gives us access to raiding, allowing us to capture voluntary forced laborers to work in our mines. This religious conversion is possible because in the flavor settings I've enabled the option that allows changing to any religion currently present in the country. It still keeps the campaign Iron Man compatible if that's something you care about, although I doubt you're that much of a masochist. So without wasting any time, I immediately convert to the Norse faith. There's no point trying to secure alliances, because the moment you change religion, you'll lose every ally anyway. This way I can immediately start converting the most populous provinces from day one, or at least the ones where I already have high control. The higher the control, the faster the conversion. The same applies to cultural conversion. Besides everything you've already seen, the Norse faith also provides all of these passive bonuses. For example, Freya already increases food production. On top of that, I can strengthen her even further by selecting an aspect, which costs 20 stability. For me, the strongest choice is definitely Odin's aspect thanks to the research bonus. Now let's talk about the estates. Sweden has a unique form of government, and it's actually a very good one. The most important bonus is the increased noble levy. That means more cavalry, and cavalry is exactly what we wanted. Because yes, every estate provides a different type of levy. For the second reform, I'd normally recommend diplomatic reputation, since it would theoretically make it easier to find allies. But honestly, who needs allies? Instead, I'm taking the agricultural reform because I already know Sweden is going to struggle with food production. Every single percent matters. The additional prosperity bonus, which increases population growth, is also very useful. Now for the remaining estates. For the commoners, I take militia to increase the number of levies along with autonomous villages. For the burghers, I pick the privilege that increases development throughout the country together with treasury rights. For the clergy, or whatever this is, I want religious administration and religious advisors. For the nobility, I take the privilege that allows me to tax them more heavily. You need to be much more careful with some of these privileges now, because they unlock estate buildings. Those buildings usually increase an estate's influence, but they also always create additional nobles. For now, I'm completely ignoring the tribal estate. Moving on to research. We begin in a rather unique situation, but my priority is boosting food production. As for rivals, I'm picking Denmark, England and Scotland. At the same time, I'll improve relations with my only vassal Scania while immediately starting a spy network in England. There's a decent chance we'll have an early war. The budget. I immediately set legitimacy spending to the maximum because I want to raise it as quickly as possible. Once that's maxed out, I'll start investing in stability until it reaches around +10. Taxes and minting are both set to automatic, except for the clergy. As always, I don't want to collect any money from them. For every other estate, I set automatic taxation somewhere between 30 and 35%. Right now, most of my tax income comes from the peasantry. The peasantry includes the population working in black, green and RGO buildings, these ones right here. Trade expenses look absolutely terrible at the moment, but they'll recalculate in a second and things should look much better. Hopefully. The main issue with minting is that the market is currently short on silver and gold. There's no point importing them manually. Instead, I use trade orders, assigning 1 point of trade power to acquire each of those resources. Now it's working properly. Next, I reduce diplomatic spending almost to the minimum. Just enough to maintain a small monthly gain. I also demolish every fort and palisade. At this point, I've already done everything that can be done while the game is paused. Everything else will have to wait. So now it's time to move on to the next stage, where I'll show you how I built Sweden's economy in the early game. I simply need to wait for some of the numbers to recalculate before deciding what to invest my money in. Right now, the initial values can often be misleading. Wow, the game really sped up. As for the law regarding the religion of my voluntary forced laborers, I am going to enforce religious conversion. This speeds up the promotion of unemployed slaves into the peasantry, and you can never have too many peasants. Now that everything has recalculated, I know exactly which buildings to construct first. I simply start with the ones at the top of the list. In general, it's worth opening the market panel at the start of the game to see which goods you have in surplus and which ones you're lacking. You can see it all right here on the left. I'm clearly short on regular clothes, but I'm also facing major shortages of clay and stone. It's worth paying attention to that, because stone is one of the fundamental resources needed for many buildings. A few more tools wouldn't hurt either. As you can see though, these shortages aren't very large, so I'll only construct burger buildings in the capital to supply those missing goods. After all, I have 100% control there. And since the demand is so low, there's no point developing the other towns just yet. Yes, the capital also counts as a town, which is why we're only constructing one building at a time. The real secret to building Sweden's economy, however, is RGOs. Realistically, I think I'll be investing in them almost exclusively for the first 100 years, especially iron and marble RGOs. I also can't neglect construction materials like timber and cut stone. After a while, the king finally teleports back to my country. He had been in Norway. Now I assign him to command the fleet. That secures steady growth in my naval values, which are exactly what I want. As a general rule, the king of Sweden should always command the fleet. As for the other national values, I want to keep traditional economy for as long as possible. Probably at least until around 1550. Later on, I'll also start increasing communalism. Unfortunately, converting the population is also extremely important. We're also relying on free subjects, not serfdom. Even though serfdom still provides incredibly powerful bonuses to levies, for Sweden it would actually be much stronger. The 100 Years' War has begun, and that could be a huge opportunity for Sweden. I'm really hoping England and France get locked into a long conflict and that England bleeds itself dry. Unfortunately, because of one event, I have to grant noble privileges earlier than I originally planned. Elite Council, which increases their influence in the government, and Noble Navy. I have to admit that during this campaign I completely forgot about estate actions. Now I can also improve relations through them, as well as obtain various other benefits in exchange for estate support. For now, I know I'll have to deal with one major rebellion in the near future, the Catholic Zealots. I also don't want a noble rebellion, which is why I granted those privileges. Now that I'm finally making a small profit, I'm saving up to build a wharf. It increases the number of available sailors. Alternatively, I could build fishing villages since they also provide sailors. The problem is that in Sweden those buildings aren't profitable, so I'd have to subsidize them. Denmark wants to sell me these two provinces for 250 gold. Honestly, I'm completely broke and simply can't afford them. I'll acquire those provinces another way. I'm also constructing a sergeantry in the capital because it'll be extremely useful. And if I forgot to mention what units I'm planning to recruit, the answer is actually none of these. The only thing I want to recruit is supply wagons. They're incredibly useful, even for armies made up entirely of levies. Let's take a quick break from staring at maps and managing iron mines to talk about today's sponsor, War Thunder. It is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, available right now for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. Take direct command of over 2,500 incredibly detailed tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations. Immerse yourself in intense combat where realistic graphics and authentic sound effects place you right at the helm. Join a worldwide community of over 95 million players in epic PvP battles, and forget about simple boxes with hit points. War Thunder has an incredibly sophisticated vehicle damage model. Their impressive X-ray view shows you exactly where your shell penetrated and what ultimately destroyed the enemy vehicle. Personally, there's nothing as satisfying as watching an enemy's ammo rack explode after your perfectly calculated shot. Well, maybe apart from the stack wipe of the entire army in EU5. Right now, War Thunder is offering a massive free bonus for all new players, and even for returning players who haven't logged in for at least 6 months on PC and consoles. To claim it, simply click the links in my pinned comment and the video description. There's one link for PC and consoles, and a separate one if you want to try the all-new mobile version. Click those links and I'll see you on the battlefield. And now we've reached the point where I get my first parliament. I'm going to use it to pass new laws. The first thing I want to do is simply favor the peasantry. I think that's much stronger than favoring the ruler. The ruler's situation is already terrible anyway, and extra 10% tax from the peasantry will definitely come in handy. As I mentioned earlier, that's where most of my tax income comes from. The nobility is simply too powerful to tax effectively without serfdom. It's also worth checking the available tax base for each estate. And the peasantry's tax base is significantly larger. Next, I abolish censorship because it increases my religious tolerance. I'll also try to pass a third agenda, although I probably won't have enough support. Maybe an event will occur if I'll get lucky. If it does, I'll be able to pass one more law. That third law would be polygamy. One small warning, don't change your heir's religion to any religion. For some reason, doing that removes your ability to pass the law that allows the conversion of slaves. I honestly don't know whether that's a bug, an intended mechanic, or just paradox being paradox. I also start increasing stability, but I only raise the spending enough to gain about plus 0.25 stability per month, nothing more. Once I reach at least 20 points in my spy network in England, I begin fabricating a casus belli, and I get lucky because England also considers me a rival. That gives me access to a very powerful casus belli. Perfect, England and France have finally gone to war, and now watch how England's number of levies starts dropping. That's exactly what I wanted. Although it looks like the war in France isn't going particularly well. For France. Wait, what happened here? Where did the French army go? I definitely wasn't expecting that. You know what, maybe I'll raid France instead. The year is 1342, which means it's time to choose our first idea group. I'm going with the administrative path. It offers the most bonuses that will benefit me throughout a long campaign, and having that emergency casus belli is always useful, especially since Sweden is the only country following the Norse faith. Although, if I were planning something truly massive like a world conquest, I definitely choose the diplomatic path instead. Overall, I think the military path is fairly weak. It focuses too heavily on levies, and those start losing their usefulness around the transition between the 3rd and 4th ages. A new age also means new research. Right away I focus on improving peasant levies, and I unlock better galleys. That alone could give me a massive advantage at sea. Honestly, I don't see any particularly exciting research options tied to our religion. Eventually, the first rebellion breaks out, a religious one. Thankfully, having a vassal completely saves me here. And I have to admit, vassals respond much better to the attached to army command now. I enabled it, and they immediately came to me. With our combined forces, defeating the rebels was easy. Now all that's left is to occupy the remaining rebel provinces. After dealing with the rebellion, I finished constructing my wharf. The next step is expanding the fleet with nothing but galleys. The only problem is money. And this is where I got surprised. England actually has a pretty sizable navy. Normally they only had 3 galleys, but this time they've expanded all the way to 14. During my second parliament, I passed the best law available for pagans, polygamy. Not long afterward, the Black Death arrives, which of course is pretty terrifying. The only really painful part is that I'd already built a road network in my most populous provinces. Who built all those roads? So I introduced segregation measures and continue focusing on increasing communalism. By the time the Black Death finally starts disappearing, I'd only lost about 150,000 people. Of course, I wasn't sitting around doing nothing. In the meantime, I'd built 9 galleys, and then I noticed something interesting. My biggest enemy army, Denmark doesn't have a single warship. Yes, literally nothing but fishing boats. So by investing mostly in RGOs, I've managed to get my economy into positive income. I've tripled the size of my navy, which means it's finally time for the first war. The war where I'll capture my first forced laborers. Voluntary forced laborers, of course. Denmark usually manages to gather quite a few allies, but the most important thing is naval superiority. So you absolutely have to check whether they have an advantage in galleys. To keep it short, they don't. I use my claims on these two provinces as my war goal, while rallying my entire levy army here. All you have to do is right-click on it. As you can see, even after the plague I can still raise 10,000 levies, while Denmark can only field around 9,000. Meanwhile, I immediately move my fleet into the strait. From this point on, I also keep a close eye on the entire coastline because I'm expecting naval landings. It's beautiful that my armies are invisible to the enemy, allowing me to surprise them with a major battle. Now I just have to retake the province capital. And look at this, the enemy armies can't cross because the exact same rule from EU4 still applies. To cross a strait, you only need to control one side while maintaining naval dominance. In other words, your fleet has to be the only one present in that strait. I can already see that the Danes have mobilized their fishing boats, so I hide my army in the forest while the Danes ferry their troops back onto their own territory. There are a few more of them than I expected. But somehow I crushed the Danish army without much trouble. I wonder why? Is my infantry really that much stronger? Now let's see whether my favorite EU4 tactic still works here. I hide my fleet and wait for the enemy to start crossing. I'll even pull my army back into the forest so it stays hidden. And yes, it works. Once my army is hidden in the forest and my fleet is sitting safely in port, the enemy starts crossing. Now it's my turn. I sail back out, secure the strait and cross over to occupy this entire area. The Danes and their allies still have some armies left, but I can't actually see them anywhere, so I'm not sure what's going on. The important part is that I'm now capturing immigrants who will soon be working for the glory of Sweden, for very low wages. So where exactly do all these workers end up? The answer is actually pretty funny. As long as I haven't built this building yet, once I occupy new territory, the captured population gets distributed evenly among all of my towns. Here's where I made a mistake. Simply starting construction of this building causes every captured worker to teleport into a single province instead. Unfortunately, I figured that out a little too late. As a result, my capital suddenly gained an extra 10,000 people who are already beginning to promote into the peasantry. From there, I continue advancing, but I move very carefully, always scouting ahead with my fleet before moving the army, just in case the enemy is nearby. At the same time, I don't forget to keep building more ships. War with England is next. Once my stability finally climbed back into positive territory, it was immediately time to spend it again. I activate Odin's aspect to catch up in research because I am starting to fall slightly behind. I finish the war by taking essentially all of Denmark's islands, along with gold and war reparations. Nothing more than that. The coalition is already getting fairly large as it is. Oh, and just before signing the peace treaty, I increase my diplomatic reputation. The higher your diplomatic reputation, the less aggressive expansion you're theoretically supposed to generate. At least that's what the tooltip says. In the newly conquered territories, I release fiefdoms because newly created fiefdoms always adopt our religion. Even so, I lost a fair number of levies during the war, so now I have to wait for them to recover. In the meantime, I build a large number of fishing villages. I also have to start subsidizing them so I can maintain a respectable sailor growth rate. And yes, I'm still focusing primarily on expanding my RGOs. More iron! I fabricate another casus belli against England, because unfortunately some time has already passed. On the bright side, about 40% of my country has already converted to the one true faith. Hey, cut me some slack, I only have 2 advisors. The casus belli is ready, the fleet is fully built, and the time has finally come to acquire some voluntary workers from England. Alright, I'll start by saying that in this war you have to be extremely careful with both the English Navy and the English Army. But if everything is executed properly, victory is absolutely possible. At first I focus entirely on naval operations, because there are going to be plenty of sea battles. And I was genuinely surprised to find myself fighting mostly England's vassals, right in my own waters. They didn't stand a chance. I absolutely massacred both their fleets and their armies. I even managed to capture quite a few ships, although most of them were probably just fishing boats. I fought several more battles just like that. Unfortunately, I only captured 1 additional ship. Still, that was very kind of them. I'll keep building my spy network in England. It might come in handy. Although, what I'd really like right now is infiltrate administration, just so I could see where the English armies are. I'm not upgrading the captured fishing boats, because I'm already paying a bit too much for my fleet. Once the war is over, they'll all be scrapped anyway. As for my regular army, I recruit a single supply wagon to start with. For an army this small, that should be more than enough. It increases my food supplies by 150, while this army only consumes 3.88. And from what I've read on the Paradox forums, the final patch 1.3 is supposed to reduce Levy supply consumption even further. Anyway, I load my 4,000 soldiers onto the ships and sail toward the Normandy coast. My plan is to focus on every province capital that doesn't have a fort. In theory, that should let me raid entire areas before withdrawing. The population map mode is also very useful here. The larger the population, the more people I can steal. Unfortunately, the richest area in the British Isles is protected by a fort. While I'm here, I'll sink a little more of the English fleet as well. And there we go. The captives are all being sent to Stockholm for now because I hadn't yet figured out exactly how this mechanic works. I think I may have just sent the entire English navy to the bottom of the sea. Still, I don't get greedy. I head straight back to port in case I suddenly need to evacuate after spotting a massive English army somewhere nearby. After all, England still has about 35,000 troops. There they go. They're being transported to Skara, to Stockholm, to Viborg, because that building was disabled after becoming unprofitable, and here come several thousand more. Oh, that's beautiful. But now the English army finally appears. I have absolutely no intention of fighting it, so I immediately retreat. I board my ships again and sail somewhere else. Cornwall sounds good. In fact, it's actually better to let the English recapture all of these provinces. That way I can come back a little later, raid them again, and steal even more population. Now I'm sailing all the way over here because I have a feeling the English army is heading toward Cornwall. Oh, definitely not landing here. There are almost 20,000 troops waiting. No thanks, we're sailing farther north, and along the way, another few tens of thousands of workers join my empire. The northern provinces don't have all that much population. Unfortunately, there are also quite a few forts up here. And now it's time to leave because the English army has finally arrived, which means it's time for my third landing in Normandy. Honestly, this mechanic is simply too powerful. It feels like I'm stealing around 10% of a province's current population every single time I raid it. As you can see though, I have to be extremely careful. My army has absolutely no chance against the English in a direct battle. My population has increased dramatically. From Normans alone, I took 64,000 people. I did have to return home for reinforcements though. There are still about 4,000 Norman troops wandering around and I'd rather not fight them. Wow, I can literally steal tens of thousands of Englishmen here. Everything was going perfectly until the enemy transferred their entire army back to England. So I take advantage of that and occupy all of Normandy as well. And I get even luckier because France declares war on England too. While I'm at it, I also capture a few castles. Although fleet maintenance is starting to become a serious problem, there is an unbelievable amount of population here. By the end of a single war, I've captured roughly 250,000 workers. Honestly, there's not much point continuing the war after that. I'm perfectly happy taking a huge pile of money along with war reparations from England. I did make one mistake here. I could have demolished their forts before signing peace. I completely forgot that was an option. And to be honest, I ended up creating several massive enclaves of voluntary forced labor. It looks like the game automatically selects certain towns to receive the captured population, whenever you don't have this particular building constructed anywhere. Afterward, those cheap workers are clearly redistributed wherever labor is needed most. In my case, that's the iron mines. So before launching another invasion of England, I need to build towns in every province that produces iron and copper. I'm now using my advisors both to convert the newly arrived population to the proper religion and to assimilate them into the correct culture. The culture of slaves itself can't be changed. However, the culture of peasants who are promoted from slavery can be. The war reparations from England aren't actually worth very much. And now that I've acquired 250,000 new workers, it's finally time to put them to work and turn them into the foundation of Sweden's economic powerhouse. I begin this stage by reducing the cost of building new towns and cities, because their construction costs have been increased once again. As for timber, I simply get it from RGOs. As Sweden, I really can't complain about that. I'll get stone from masonries. The only change I make is selecting clay in the production methods, because I already have plenty of it. Glass can be produced either in this new building or in this urban building, and the urban one seems much more efficient to me. I also forgot that when we want to assimilate a culture into our own, it's better to mark it as hostile. so that's something I'll be working toward as well. I already hate the Danes, now it's the Normans' turn. Oh, except I don't have enough prestige. Of course, I haven't really fought any major battles. During every new parliament I also try to keep increasing taxes. Because they give a significant boost to the treasury, I also unlock another reduction to city construction costs. And now I'm going to build towns on literally every iron and copper resource deposit, well, at least where I already have population. Where I don't, it's time to bring some in. After that, I'll fully upgrade the RGOs in each of those towns. And wherever an RGO is already maxed out, I'll grant the special Swedish urban right. Don't expect me to pronounce its name correctly, but it's this one. Yes, it costs quite a bit of legitimacy. Only now does my ruler finally die. I've actually been waiting for this because it starts a regency. None of the previous rulers met the necessary requirements. Honestly, I think that regency could have lasted forever. I'm not sure whether that's a bug or whether it actually has some hidden advantages. Either way, I decide to let the Queen Regent take power. She immediately has an heir. Our crown prince can have multiple wives. That's one of his biggest strengths. Unfortunately, because my court is still very small, I have to look for princesses among the common folk. Still, it's a worthwhile investment because your dynasty grows incredibly quickly that way. In fact, judging by what I can see, I already have quite a large family. And yes, my crown power has definitely improved. As for slaves, I've also noticed that they can't migrate, at least I don't see them moving between provinces on their own. They are, however, transported as a commodity. And from what I've observed, that happens under two circumstances. The first is when RGOs needs additional workers. The second is when a province contains a slave market. That's when I can clearly see them moving between those provinces, with their numbers balancing themselves out over time. Unfortunately for me, Gotland broke free in the meantime and became a pirate republic. I could ask the Teutonic Order to help deal with the problem. Alternatively, I could solve it myself, or even become a pirate republic, although it doesn't actually mention that here. Something definitely isn't working properly because I switched over to Gotland, and that's interesting. I wonder what would happen if you combined a pirate republic with the Norse faith. Just to be safe, I'll keep this save file so I can try it in another campaign. In this one, though, I'm conquering them. Ha! Turns out they're Catholic. So naturally they become voluntary forced laborers too. After that, I simply take the territories for myself. Once the towns are established, I go back to doing the usual things. Mainly scaling demand, starting with libraries. Building them increases demand for those goods. It also took me embarrassingly long to notice that Norway was no longer in a personal union with me. So it's finally time to begin conquering Norway as well. For that, I'll use the parliamentary casus belli. Well, I definitely wasn't expecting this. I immediately send my fleet to the Straits, because I was genuinely caught by surprise. For the first time in this game, the AI actually declared war on me. They do have numerical superiority, but I'm pretty confident I'll win this without much trouble. Especially since I completely dominate these waters with only 8 galleys, mainly because the enemy doesn't have any. Unless, of course, my vassals decide to commit seppuku. Naturally, nothing beats a great start to a war. Once my army is assembled, I use my standard tactic. I hide my fleet and bait the enemy army into crossing onto the islands. Then I make my move. Honestly, I think I'm really going to enjoy fighting over Straits. It's just as satisfying as it was in EU4. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out my latest Byzantium episode from EU4, where I use exactly the same tactic to defeat the Ottoman Empire. And just like that, I've conquered Denmark, which means a coalition is now very likely. We'll see whether I survive it. Now that my economy is finally generating a respectable income, I can afford to begin colonization. It's basically the standard approach. I simply click on a province and send colonists there. Once enough settlers arrive, that province becomes an integral part of my country. Surprisingly late, I researched banking. It also introduces a new mechanic, the ability to issue government bonds and finance the country's development through debt. I also want to start producing regular paper, increase the maximum literacy level. As I mentioned before, infiltrate administration will also be incredibly useful. And as Sweden, I'll definitely need the best ships currently available. During one of the later parliaments, I finally get offered something extremely useful: reduced RGO construction costs. This is literally the first time it's appeared during the entire campaign. I don't know whether I was just unlucky or if it's genuinely that rare now. Either way, reducing the construction cost of food RGOs by 1/3 is an enormous saving. It lets me build dozens of RGOs simultaneously. The war against Norway was so easy that it wasn't even worth showing. But it did teach me something. When a country capitulates, you don't receive any cheap workers. And it's obvious that Norway will have to be conquered in at least 2 separate wars. Not because aggressive expansion is particularly high, nobody really cares. It's simply because Norway is too large. Wow, Hellenism has appeared in Byzantium, but where exactly? Here's what's left of Byzantium, but I don't actually see the religion anywhere. You won't believe this. England surrendered during yet another war. Literally 4,000 of my soldiers forced the capitulation of all of England. While they still had an army of 30,000 men, I gained another 200,000 workers, most of whom I relocated to these provinces. This time, besides taking money and war reparations, I also demolished every fortification on the British Isles before signing peace. I decided to upgrade Falun, where my improved copper deposits are located, into a full city. I also built a governor there. As a result, I now have an incredible 95% control. Overall, my control levels across the kingdom are looking very good. Falun and Nora are now the 2 richest locations in my kingdom. Cities can now have 2 urban rights. The first one is already the same everywhere. For the second, I once again choose the Swedish specific privilege that increases maximum control. And to be honest, I'm seriously considering shifting most of the tax burden away from the peasantry and onto the burghers instead. Still, I think I'm well on my way to making Sweden even wealthier. That's exactly what I'll be focusing on in the next episode, where my goal will be conquering this entire region. Before you launch your next great campaign, don't forget to grab your massive free bonus in War Thunder. Just click the links in the description and the pinned comment. See you next time, Imperialists!